Alam mo ba na ang linear function can be represented in a straight line? Yan ang ating pag-uusapan dito sa ating matsayang talakayan. Kaya, stay tuned! Hello, grade 8 learners! For today's lesson, we are going to discuss linear function. At the end of this video, you will be able to graph and illustrate a linear function and its domain, range, intercepts, and slopes. So linear function is defined by f of x is equal to mx plus b, where m and b are real numbers. Its graph is a line with the slope m and the y-intercept b. If the slope is not equal to 0, then the degree of the function is 1. If the slope is equal to 0 and the y-intercept is not equal to 0, then the degree of a function is 0. And if the slope is 0 and the y-intercept is 0, then the degree of the function is not defined. To further understand, let us have this example. Is the function f defined by f of x is equal to 2x plus 3 a linear function? If yes, determine the slope and the y-intercept. So, f of x is equal to 2x plus 3. Yes, it is a linear function. Why? Since the degree or the highest exponent of x is 1, and it is written in the form of f of x equals mx plus b. So, the slope is 2 and the y-intercept is 3. Another example is the function g defined by g of x equals negative x a linear function? If yes, determine the slope and the y-intercept. Is the function g defined by g of x equals negative x a linear function? Yes, you are correct. The function g defined by g of x equals negative x is a linear function because it has a degree of 1. To determine the slope and the y-intercept, g of x equals negative x can be written as g of x equals negative 1x plus 0. So, the slope is negative 1 and the y-intercept is 0. Another example is the function h defined by h of x equals x squared plus 5x plus 4 a linear function? The answer is not a linear function. Why? Because it is on the second degree. Now, a linear function can be described using its graph. For us to graph a linear function, so we need to determine the values of the function f if f of x is equal to 2x minus 1 at x equals negative 3, 0, and 2. So, ang gagawin lang natin dito is to simply substitute the given values of x to the function. So, if x is negative 3, using the function, f of x is equal to 2 times negative 3 minus 1. So, ang ginawa lang natin, we replaced negative 3 to the variable x. Then, simplify. So when we simplify, that is equivalent to 2 times negative 3 is equal to negative 6 minus 1. Then, negative 6 minus 1 is equivalent to negative 7. So, if x now is equal to 0, so we have f of x is equal to 2 times 0 minus 1. And that will give you negative 1. And if x is equal to 2, so we have f of x is equal to 2 times 2 minus 1. And that will give you 3. Now we have to write the results in table form. So if x is negative 3, we have negative 7. If x is 0, so we have negative 1. If x is 2, then we have 3. Then, locate these points on a Cartesian plane. So, we have negative 3, negative 7 represents that point. Then we have 0, negative 1, and 2, 3. Then, connect the points. And that is now the graph of a linear function. As being defined a while ago, a linear function is described by a straight line. So, pwedeng straight line or it is a slanting line. Now, let us determine whether the given function is a graph of a linear function or not. So, let's take a look on the first graph. Is it a linear function? The answer is not a linear function, since it is not a straight line. How about on the second graph? You are correct. It is not a linear function. Again, it is not a straight line. How about on the third graph? Exactly, it is a linear function. Let us determine the domain and range of the following graph. On the first graph, we have the domain includes all set of real numbers. Bakit? Dahil nag-extend yung graph natin without bound to the left at nag-extend na graph natin without bound to the right. Okay, how about the range? Ang range naman, sabi niya, is greater than or equal to negative 1. So, yung graph, dumaan siya dito sa negative 1 and all numbers pataas. So, greater than negative 1. That's why we have our range, any numbers greater than or equal to negative 1. Now, let us take a look on the second graph. Sa second graph, mapapansin natin na yung direction is to the right. So, ibig sabihin, ang domain natin ay greater than 0. Hindi na siya dumaan sa 0, kaya ang 0 ay hindi na included sa domain. Okay, ang range naman natin, since ang graph natin is nag-move pababa, so ang direction pababa, hindi na rin siya dumaan sa taas. So, ibig sabihin that y is any set of real numbers less than 0. And on the third graph, arrowheads extends to the right without bound, extends to the left without bound, extend to the positive numbers upward without bound, at nag-extend din negative numbers pababa without bound. So we have now the domain are set of real numbers and the range are all set of real numbers. So what can you say now about the domain and range of linear function? Since sabi natin kanina, yung third graph natin is a linear function. So the domain and range of a linear function, if the function f defined by f of x equals mx plus b, where m is not equal to 0, then the domain of a function is represented by real numbers and the range of the function is represented by all real numbers. So we can write it in this symbol. So what does this mean? So on the domain, we have the domain of the function f is the set of all x such that x is an element of the set of real numbers. And for the range of the function f is the set of all y such that y is an element of the set of real numbers. So, ibig sabihin, when we talk about linear function, ang domain natin ay lahat ng real numbers at ang range natin ay lahat din ng real numbers. Ngayon naman, we are going to determine a linear function represented in table. Okay, so let's explore first the given function. If we have g of x is equal to 2x plus 4. So let us represent values of this function in a table. So let's say if x is 1, then we will solve for the g of x. So g of x is equal to 2x plus 4. If x is 1, so substitute lang natin. So magiging 2 times 1 plus 4 and the result is equal to 6. Now, if x is 3, so 2 times 3 plus 4. So 2 times 3 is 6 plus 4 is 10. Then next, if x is 5. Again, substitute. So we have 2 times 5 plus 4. 2 times 5 is 10 plus 4. So we have 14. Then next, we have x is 7. So substitute 2 times 7 plus 4. So we have 14 plus 4, which is equivalent to 18. Then we have 2x plus 4. If x is equal to 9, then we have 2 times 9 plus 4. So we have 18 plus 4, that will give you 22. Now that we already have completed the table, so ang gagawin natin is to find the first difference of the x values and the first difference of the y values. So paano yon? So ang gagawin lang natin ay isusubtract natin yung 3 by 1. So we have 3 minus 1 is equal to 2. Then 5 minus 3. So 5 minus 3 is equal to 2. Then 7 minus 5. So we have 2. 9 minus 7 will give you 2. Okay, so let's get the difference or first difference on the g of x or y values. So 10 minus 6 is equal to 4. 14 minus 4 is equal to 4. 18 minus 14 is equal to 4. And 22 minus 18 is equal to 4. So what does it implies? Anong ibig sabihin nito? Now, the function is a linear function if the first differences on x coordinates are equal and the first differences on y coordinates are equal. So ibig sabihin, when we subtract the first difference or when we get the first difference of the x values, dapat sila ay equal. Okay? And then when we get the first differences on the y values or g of x, so lahat din sila ay equal. Para masabi natin that the given table of values of a function is linear. How about this one? With the given function, since it is on the second degree, so masasabi natin that this is not a linear function. Okay, tingnan natin kung ano ang mangyayari on the first differences of x and y. So let us first have the table of values. So let us evaluate h of x equals x squared plus 1 if x is negative 2. So we have negative 2 quantity squared plus 1. So we have 4 plus 1, which is equivalent to 5. Then, if x is equal to negative 1, so negative 1 squared plus 1 is equal to 1 plus 1, which is equivalent to positive 2. If x is 0, so we have 0 squared plus 1, and that is equal to 1. If x is equal to 1, so 1 squared plus 1 is 1 plus 1, which is equivalent to 2. Then, if x is positive 2, so 2 squared plus 1, that will give you 4 plus 1, which is equivalent to 5. Okay, now that we have completed, so let's get the first differences on x values. So we have 1 or negative 1 minus negative 2. So we have 1. 0 minus negative 1, we have 1. 1 minus 0 is 1. And 2 minus 1 is equal to 1. Okay, sa x-coordinates or sa x values, the first differences are equal. How about on the y values? So 2 minus 5 is negative 3. 1 minus 2 is negative 1. 2 minus 1 is 1. And 5 minus 2 is 3. So they are not equal. Okay, kaya if it is not linear function, so hindi magiging equal yung kanyang mga first differences on the y value or y coordinates. The function is not linear if the first differences on x coordinates are equal and the first differences in y coordinates are not equal. As a conclusion, the function is linear if the first differences on x coordinates are equal and the first differences on y coordinates are equal. However, the function is not linear if the first differences on x coordinates are equal and the first differences in y coordinates are not equal. So let us try this one. Is this a linear function? So let's get the first difference on the x coordinates. So 3 minus 1, we have 2. 5 minus 3, we have 2. 7 minus 5, we have 2. Then on y coordinates, 30 minus 10 is 20. 50 minus 30 is 20. And 70 minus 50 is 20. So, this table represents linear function. And we have the domain 1, 3, 5, 7 and the range 10, 30, 50, and 70. And now it's your turn. Get your paper and pen and then determine whether the function below is a linear or not. And that's for today, guys. Mag-practice at magtiyaga upang lalong maging magaling. Again, this is Teacher Dali na nagsasabing, Practice makes perfect. Thanks for watching!